Hello, hello, hello. So excited for everyone who is joining us here today at the Gathering Spot TGCS Connect family. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and to all the thought leaders, community, individuals, everyone who is tuned in today. Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to first start off by introducing myself. I'm Dr. Nicole Garner Scott, founder of Amount Financial, which is really targeted at having these type of conversations and discussions with dealing with economic empowerment in our community. So I want to welcome friends, family, community leaders, healthcare professionals, and the community, which is you, to Keeping the Faith in Times of Crisis, presented by Alive in Color. Once again, I'm your host throughout this evening. So if you have any questions, concerns, you want to chime in any way, so because this is with our community. This is the third of a series of 8 candid COVID conversations. I had to not let that be a tongue tie for me. Before I go any further, I want to personally take the time to thank a lot of people who helped make this happen. One being Impact Church, a church that I've gone to for years and love that church. The Black Cross, which they describe themselves as the Red Cross meets the Black community meets the block. The Gathering Spot, and CORE, which stands for Community Organized Relief Effort, for partnering with us and lending their platforms to this very much important cause. The purpose of tonight's conversation is to provide a trusted space for our community to engage experts for a better understanding of the realities of COVID-19, impact on communities of color specifically. Keeping the Faith in Times of Crisis will explore the following topics: the role of spirituality and public theology in forming a community consciousness, the importance of mindfulness and belief in staying centered and grounded, reconciling science and religion in combating COVID-19, the Black church social services, and the acceleration of social equity. Once again, welcome, and we appreciate and we value your time. Now let's introduce you guys to the amazing round table of panelists. I'm going to have them chime in on what it is that they do in depth, and how they contribute to the community in under 1 minute each. So we'll welcome Reverend Dr. Toni Alvarado. Dr. Alvarado is the co-pastor of Grace Church International, with locations in DeKalb County and Clayton County, founder and executive director of My Sister's Keepers Foundation for Women, and president of Targeted Living Coaching and Consulting, LLC. She's the author of Run and Not Be Weary, The Pursuit of Purpose and Destiny, Stoking the Fire of Your Dreams, Harmonizing Your Life, A Journey Towards Self-Care, and co-authored Let's Stay Together, Relationship Strategies for Successful Marriages, with her husband, Dr. Jonathan E. Alvarado. Reverend Dr. Alvarado, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Grace Church International and My Sister's Keepers Foundation.
There we go. I want to thank you for inviting me to this community conversation. I have been pastoring with my husband here in the Atlanta area, in the metropolitan area of Atlanta, for 28 years. I hail originally from the city of Chicago, but migrated to Georgia 32 years ago. My husband and I are very involved in the community work. We do activism work, not just in our local church, but in the community. We consider our responsibility to be public theologians and to be chaplains to the community that we serve. And that's what I do principally. My principal work is co-pastor of my local church. And then My Sister's Keeper Foundation is the nonprofit organization that I founded in 2004. We run a leadership and life coaching program for women. We do scholarship programs for women and girls going to college. And to date, I'm so proud to say we have given away over $85,000 in scholarships to women going to college or returning to college or going for the first time. And I am very, very excited about this conversation. I am also a podcast host of the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast, and retreat leader for the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Retreat. And so the nexus of wellness and spirituality is where I live and breathe.
I love it. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Alvarado, and thank you for joining us. Next up, let's welcome Reverend Paul Thibodeaux. Reverend Paul is one of the pastors at Impact Church in East Point. He is a native of Chicago, Illinois, and attended Iowa State University. Shortly after obtaining his degree in architecture, he moved to Atlanta and continued a successful career in retail architecture until he realized God wanted him to build people instead of buildings. He obtained his Master's of Divinity degree from Gammon at ITC. He has served at various churches around Atlanta before coming to Impact Church. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Thibodeaux. And Reverend, could you tell us a little bit more about your work at Impact?
Certainly, Dr. Garner Scott. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to all those that are serving on the panel along with me. It's going to be a great opportunity to share today. I've been at Impact Church for 3 years as the Connections Pastor. And what I do is provide leadership and support in serving in everything that has to do with connections. And so that would be all of our small groups. That would be our outreach. That would be our online and our streaming community. That would be our membership. That would be our volunteers, meaning the volunteers within the church. That would be our hospitality and how we continue to maintain a radical, hospitable atmosphere for anyone that chooses to visit Impact Church. That would be our sacraments, and that would also be our care ministry. And currently, we're in the process of our phase 2A, which is a building out of 50,000 square feet new space, which is going to be equipped with a gym and build out space to where we will offer different spaces and thematic spaces to the community in the areas of workforce development, workforce readiness, preparing people for careers, and also meeting the needs of the community in extending the learning programs of our students in our schools. It's great to be here and looking forward to our time this evening.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Reverend. If everyone can join me in welcoming Anthony Flynn. Mr. Anthony, we're going to pretend you could hear the applause happening virtually. Anthony Flynn is founder of Amazing CEO. Anthony holds a Bachelor of Business Administration and Sales from the University of Memphis and a Master of Arts in Religion degree from Memphis Theological Seminary, where he graduated with honors. He is a highly sought after advisor to CEOs, key executives, and their companies. He has been a leader with numerous Fortune 100 giants and a pioneering executive in several multi-million-dollar nonprofit ventures. He has served as CEO of the 100 Black Men of Atlanta and currently serves as the CEO of Work Faith Connection in Houston, Texas. Anthony, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And you essentially told the story for me, so I don't need to say a whole lot. I appreciate your introduction. And I spend a lot of time, you all, with high capacity CEOs and key executives. I have several Fortune 50 clients, all the way from there, ranging to individuals who are in startup and who are trying to actually scale their ventures. I also work with a number of professional athletes and celebrities as well. And so I love the way I spend my time every day. And then, as you mentioned, I also get to function as a practitioner with an organization called the Work Faith Connection, where our mission is to provide faith-based training and coaching for anyone who desires long-term employment. So it's a multi-million-dollar venture where we basically help people find a job, keep a job.
I love it. Thank you so much. Last but not least, let's all welcome Reverend Reginald Lee Backus, Associate Pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church. Reverend Backus is a third-generational Baptist preacher from Kansas City, Kansas. After graduating high school, Backus attended Prairie View A&M University and earned a degree in electrical engineering. In 2003, Reggie yielded to the call of Christ to preach the gospel. After graduation from Prairie View in 2006 and under the guidance of Reverend Dr. Michael P. Williams, Reverend Backus entered Yale Divinity School, where he went on to serve in numerous leadership capacities and congregations across the tri-state area. In 2015, Reverend Backus accepted the invitation to serve as associate pastor of the globally recognized institution, the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, New York. In 2018, Reverend Backus attended law school on a full scholarship to Hofstra Law School. In 2019, he founded the 400 Foundation and began organizing congregations and lobbying at the local and state level on behalf of the needs of Black people, Black churches, and Black businesses. Reverend Backus, please tell us a little about yourself and your work with Abyssinian Baptist Church and the 400 Foundation.
First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Garner Scott. First of all, I see there's a Chicago connection. I think it was left out in Chicago and Houston, Texas. So, we got a lot of synergy already. So super excited. But you said pretty much everything other than it's also the CEO of Abyssinian Development Corporation. When we were going through a transitional period, $40 million in the hole. By the grace of God, 2.5 years, we got the $7.5 million in the black. My time in Chicago was community organizing on the west side of Chicago with JP Morgan Chase, started a non-for-profit called Austin Coming Together. In 2010, we launched a 10-year plan for 2020 that's still in operation now. So I've done a lot of work in not-for-profit spaces, community organizing, TV show, radio show. At Abyssinian Baptist Church, was just preaching and trying to be the janitor, basically do whatever needed to be done. 400 Foundation, it was birthed to memorialize the 400th anniversary of slavery in North America from an economic and political national system. We know that slavery certainly preceded 1619, but to that 400th anniversary, we saw biblical precedent and historical precedent. We were able to organize churches across the city and state of New York to really engage in political activism and lobbying, because I did not see us as I went through the halls of our state capitol. Excited to be here.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. As everyone can see, we have a power panel here tonight. Very excited about the level of conversation we're going to get into. So as we get ready to jump into the conversation, I want to talk about a few ground rules for everyone, and then we'll go ahead and kick this off. For our panelists, I ask that you keep all responses concise and respect each other by allowing everyone to answer the questions before chiming in. And then when you want to chime in, you could just raise your hand. I can see you, and I'll make note of that and bring you into that question or that conversation. To our audience, this conversation will get better throughout the night with the audience's support. So please feel free to engage, drop your questions in the chat, and we'll read them as we enter into each new topic. Also, in the chat, you'll also see the social media handles of everyone participating and everyone who helped to make this happen. So we ask that you please show love on social media as well as we continue through the evening. So diving right on in, our first topic for tonight is the role of spirituality and public theology in forming a community consciousness. So I want to kick this question off by directing this to Dr. Alvarado and Dr. Thibodeaux. One might say that the last 4 years, and 2020 in particular, has tested just about everything we thought we knew about social norms and how we envision community in this country. From police brutality to pandemics to economic recession, we are being called to come together as a country. But Tuesday's elections has shown us that we are perhaps more divided than ever. In regards to that, I would love to start off with you, Dr. Thibodeaux. Let's talk about community consciousness. What is that to you, and why do you feel like it's necessary?
Well, I would simply say that community consciousness is understanding the truth behind what's happening in the community, and understanding where we are based on reality, based on data, based on research. And what it does is it gives us a sense of where we are, and it gives us a sense of what we're fighting against and what we have to do, and in order to make us all better. When we think about all of the things that have happened in this pandemic season, when we think about our public health and we think about the way it has affected Black and brown people, it is disproportionate in numbers and how many Black and brown people have contacted, the virus. When we think about our public safety, the bottom line is people, our Black and brown brothers and sisters are not coming home. It's not a discussion about what somebody did wrong and whether or not they need to be, confronted by police. The idea is we are not coming home. And so families are being affected, generations are being affected. And so the consciousness means that we are understanding what's happening to our communities, how our families are being affected. And then simply, from an equity standpoint, we know that as this country's not been founded with everybody having a just and fair opportunity for everybody to thrive, that is still the case. And so being conscious in our community is understanding where all those factors lie, understanding how data supports it, and understanding that we have an obligation to embrace the truth and speak the truth, and then help our current generation and help the generations that are coming before us understand the truth. So we're not blindsided. We understand how to love each other. We understand how to communicate with each other. But more importantly, we understand the truth about where we are as a community.
That's good. That's good. Dr. Alvarado, what has 2020 illuminated for you about the state of community and community consciousness in our country?
Well, I'll just say this, the 2020 has really shown us, and as you stated, the election on Tuesday night has shown us that this country is literally split down the middle. Mm-hmm. And we're in a very dangerous place right now, I think, as a nation, because we are not united. We are very divided. We are divided on political party. We're divided gender-wise. We're divided. Even in the church, we're divided. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be a healing and a coming together if we're going to move forward from this place. One of the things that that has been revealed, even in this pandemic, when you ask what is community consciousness, it's not just being aware of the community, but it's being aware of my part in the community, the role that I play in the community. What role do I have in, and what responsibility do I have in the health of my community, in the mental health, the spiritual health, the physical health, financial health of my community. And I think there's I think it's a Swahili proverb that talks about Ubuntu, I am because we are. And when we have to get back to understanding that God did not create us to be in silos as individuals, but God created us to exist in community. And so when I am not concerned about my neighbor, for me, when we talk about the pandemic, and just something as simple as wearing a mask has become a point of a political football. It has become a point of contention and strife in our community, and not recognizing that the mask is not even for me. My mask, me wearing a mask, is to protect the other. It's to protect you. And you wearing a mask is to protect me. But when we do not consider that my responsibility and my role in keeping our whole community healthy as it relates to this pandemic or any other way, we are in trouble. So this year has really highlighted the fact that we have to come back to understanding how we as individuals, the impact that we have as individuals on the overall health of our community.
That's good. Dr. Alvarado and Dr. Thibodeaux, could you expand a little bit on what you feel like the call to action is right now for our communities, and why that call to action is so important?
I'll start. I think, I think it's number one. I think one call to action is listening. I think that there needs to be a safe place for us to hear one another. I was even listening to I've been watching the election, and I'm very interested in what's going on. I served as a poll worker in my county here where I live. I live in Rockdale County, Georgia, and I served as a poll worker here for the election. And so I'm very involved. I've done a lot of work with getting people registered to vote and things of that nature. And so I was listening to one of the commentators this week on just talking about the election. And one of the things he was saying was that whoever wins this election, many of us have a particular person that we want to see win, but whoever wins, we have to, on the other side of this, sit down and hear each other, because we are killing ourselves as a nation because we're not listening to one another. We're not hearing what are some of the real needs. When we say understanding the needs of the community, some of that is just going on a listening tour and hearing what are the real felt needs of the community. So I think we should start with a little less talking and a little more listening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to, continue that conversation as Dr. Alvarado has started, speaking from a standpoint of healing. I think that this country hasn't healed from the atrocities of, from the transatlantic slave trade. I think that is where everything has begun, and we haven't healed from that. And as a community, our call to action is to work for our own healing, and from a sense of self-care, from a sense of dialogue and listening and communication. And I want to share a quote that President Obama said, why he was asked why he decided to run for president. And what his answer was, he wanted to do something that was bigger than himself.
Yeah.
And that was more than just himself individually. And so as Dr. Alvarado alluded to, our community aspect, it's not about us. The world we live in, it's bigger than us. And it's not about our individualism, which that's what we're focused on now. And so as a call to action, we've got to realize that we're here to get along with each other. We're here to help encourage each other. And all of us are going through this thing trying to figure it out. None of us have the perfect agenda. None of us have the perfect program. And we're all here struggling for the same things. We want the same things. We desire the same things. And through that, if we work through understanding that it's bigger than us, that can help us. And then as I look at the book behind Dr. Alvarado, Self-Care, that is so important for our call to action, to take care of ourselves. We don't know how much everything is happening to us. We don't know about the internalized trauma that when we watch videos, that when we look at the news, I mean, I'm sure all of us can say that we were waking up in the middle of the night, having to go to the bathroom, and we're looking at the phone to figure out what's happening, with the election. And so,
it's the truth.
Absolutely. And so many things are in our heart and in our soul, and we're not taking care of ourselves and depositing that somewhere so that we can continue to get better. We're walking around with it, carrying this pressure with nowhere to put it. And we've got to help each other be able to place it places so we can be our best self.
And can I just add one other thing? The Bible says we perish for the lack of knowledge. And so I think one of the calls to action has to be educating our community. That's why spaces like what we've created tonight, what you've created in this conversation. One good thing that's come out of this pandemic, I have been a part of more. I can't tell you, I don't know a time that I have sat on this many panels. I have at least once a week, I'm being asked to talk on a panel about COVID-19, about the role of the church, the role of faith leaders, and self-care. I told you I'm a podcast leader, so I have a podcast, and my podcast is all about self-care, and I bring professional women and men onto the podcast to talk to us about how to remain healthy in a pandemic, talking about our pre-existing conditions. One of the reasons that this pandemic or this virus has been so volatile in the African American community and in communities of color is because the pre-morbidities that we carry. And so we got to do more about caring for our bodies. But we can't lead in every disease, and then a virus can take us out because of high blood pressure, because of diabetes, because of stress and because we're not eating right, we're not exercising, we're not taking care of ourselves, spirit, soul, and body, mental health, all those things matter. And when I'm healthy, I can be a better citizen. I can be a better pastor. I can be a better wife, mother. I can be better for my community when I'm healthy. Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And I can only love you to the degree that I love me.
That's good. That's good. And I love that you talked about mental health. When I grew up in church, that was like a taboo topic, things that we didn't talk about. And I love that we have moved into a space as a community to be able to freely talk about mental health and talk about how that impacts us as a community. Anthony, Mr. Flynn, one might say that forming a community consciousness is crucial to the survival of a thriving business, company, or organization. Are there ways in which you bring a public theology of sorts into your coaching practice?
Absolutely. Again, I spend a lot. First of all, let me say that I believe that, those who are in the marketplace, those who are in the business community really do have an opportunity to influence culture. And what we sell, what we produce, what the services we provide we have a major opportunity to influence culture. So my framework and with my clients is I want to work with people who I present what I call a redemptive framework. So I think sometimes people go into business and essentially when they go into business, they're trying to take advantage of the marketplace, right? It's all about them. It's all about their own personal consumption. It's all about what they can get, the house they can build, the car they can drive, et cetera. I'm not telling anybody it's anything wrong with that. The phase 2 is what I call the ethical phase, where we're more or less neutral. Like, hey, I'm not doing bad for the community or bad for the business world. So as a result, I'm good. But I like to present what I call the redemptive case. And that is that as you're out producing products, as you're out presenting your services to the marketplace, what about coming up with ideas, prototypes, and things we can add value to the business world that actually redeem culture, right? So I use that biblical framework to think every day that I get up and I'm engaging a client, how do I influence this client to actually use redemption in their approach with how they lead, how they manage, the types of products they make? And so candidly, I think on the low, this is why a brand like a Chick-fil-A is so successful. There's division around that, right? Even that company politically because of their worldviews. But in reality, ultimately, they stand for redemption. And so regardless of people's political views on them, people appreciate what they offer to the marketplace because of much of their perspective around redemption. And I think for those of us who are out there, we should also consider that as we're opening up opportunities to present businesses, to be CEOs, to be executives, to be leaders in culture in the marketplace, we need to be redemptive in our approach. And I hope that makes sense.
That does. That's good. Thank you. We're getting ready to transition to our second topic. But before we do, I just want to encourage everyone who's on to make sure that you tag everyone who has helped to make this possible, the gathering spot, and all the panelists and your moderator, me as well. Tag us through the conversation. And if you have questions, this is your time to start dropping those questions into the chat. And we'll start to pick your questions and gather your questions as we continue through this. So going into our second topic, which is the importance of mindfulness and belief in staying centered and grounded. I'm just going to read off a few stats from the Alive in Color organization, and then we're going to transition into Reverend Dr. Backus answering the next flow of questions. So COVID-19 has amplified the impact of many socioeconomic issues amongst Black and Hispanic communities, driving a host of mental and behavioral health issues. A recent study conducted by the team at Alive and in Color, who presented this today, asked Fulton County residents about the state of their mental health. The findings indicate we are indeed having challenges managing our new normal. 56% of African Americans responders indicated that they felt anxious at least one day a week. 50% have felt depressed, and 52% indicated feelings of being alone or loneliness. We're also seeing an uptick in violent crimes, domestic violence, and substance abuse. African Americans have been shown to be 2 times more likely to abuse substances as a way to cope with COVID-19 stress-related emotions. So Reverend Backus, you've recently launched an initiative, 40 Days of Prayer and Fasting, as a response to some of the hardships that you were seeing firsthand. Tell us about how you are seeing faith help us manage in these times.
Well, excellent question. When you take it back to the historical context of the brothers and sisters who were imported, stolen from the motherland, you have the Bakongo from the Democratic Republic of Congo, you have the Akan tribe from Ghana and Ivory Coast, you have the Wolof from Senegal and Gambia. And what happened is that faith became a common consciousness, a collective vocabulary that bound us together. And in the absence of the gathering together of people of faith, without having that faith, it doesn't allow us to elevate our struggle, to elevate the conversation to that level of collective consciousness that brings us together. So the ingenious part of God, how he moved through slavery, is that they took a Bible and they had the spiritual creativity and discernment to extract that part that was common to all of them. They knew what it was to be slaves. They knew what it was to be oppressed. And what faith has always done is keep us grounded, to give us a common language and framework to stay connected, because the greatest struggle and challenge right now has been the isolation. What the devil does is make you feel like you're going through it on your own, feel like you are isolated. You are the only one who's going through what you're going through. But when you have a common language, a common faith, the Bible says there's a cloud of witnesses that are encouraging us and cheering us on. You're able to connect it to something bigger and greater than yourself.
That's good. That's good. And so through your program, through the fasting and through prayer, is that how you're seeing people be able to cope with what's going on better?
Yeah, so we started the 40 days of prayer and fasting, very intentional about a global movement. We have people praying in Paris, Sri Lanka, Brazil, Ghana, Uganda, Nairobi. And it was really about a global move of prayer. What we recognize is that if we didn't get the collective cries of people lifting their voices to God right now, and that common call, that common prayer has strengthened us. And we've also seen signs, miracles, and wonders, because when faith is activated, amazing things begin to happen. So we tapped into the power of prayer through daily devotionals, having a guided study. They were really focused on dealing with, what I went through. We'll talk about it later, COVID-19 and the long haul effect and coming out of that. And it really was faith and it was prayer that kept me motivated and encouraged. On that night, I wanted to give up. Something told me just start praying. And I told the Lord, I'm going to get everybody I can to start praying, because I still believe that God can help us navigate out of this situation.
How should we start engaging our faith communities as we're headed back into tighter restrictions? Some states are starting to go reverting back to level 1 security restrictions. A lot of travel is starting to be halted over the holidays that people are used to. A lot of community organizations are starting to be mandated to eliminate or limit their gatherings again. Just a lot of those things are starting to happen. How should we be engaging the faith community as we start to go back into some of that framework?
So in the book of Exodus, there's a fascinating story about a bush that's burning but's not consumed, and out of it erupts the voice of God to Moses. And the powerful question that God asked Moses is, what's in your hand? And I think this venue tonight is just a demonstration and emblematic of the possibilities of how we have to use what's in our hand, leveraging technology, leveraging virtual connections, because the key in this period is maintaining touch points, connection, whether it be over prayer lines, Zoom meetings, Facebook Live, church services. It's really about how do you keep people engaged, keep the message of motivation and hope constantly in front of them. We know that men can live for a few days without food and water, but we can't sustain long without hope, without encouragement, without faith, those things that keep us grounded. So it's really taking advantage of the resources and opportunities that are before us to maintain those connection points.
Thank you, Reverend Backus. Mr. Flynn, as a coach, you have a ton of experience teaching people how to find and to keep their center. It's something I personally very much spend a lot of time on myself. And you've also published a book, The Happiness Map, Finding Fulfillment in Life and Work. Are there coping strategies that you see with your clients that you can share with our audience today with getting through these times?
Absolutely. I think, and we're on this topic, I'll start with some of the things I do just to make it practical. So I try to practice what I preach, but every single morning I get up between the hours of 3:30 and 4:30, depending upon my workout days. And the first thing I do is literally my Bible study. And sometimes we hear that. Some people say it's literal for me because of my story and my background. I can't live without the gospel in my spirit. And so every single morning I get up and I spend that quality, quiet time with God. And I can't tell you how powerful that has been and transformative in my life. I didn't grow up in the church. And so my life before that was pure chaos, and it's still chaos, but it's positive chaos now. And I'd like to encourage those that are out there to really think about setting aside time to just have spiritual connection and spiritual development and spend that vital time, in transformation with God and God's presence. Another thing I've done, and some people may think this is almost ridiculous, but I actually have not listened to the radio since my son started 6th grade, and he's a senior in high school this year. Now, I'm not saying that everybody else should do that, but here's the point. For me, that morning window, because I would drive him 45 minutes to school every morning. But when I'm in the car, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to gospel music, I'm listening to jazz, because my schedule is so intense because of what I do and because of how God wired me. And so to offset the intensity of my schedule, I really, truly have to have that time carved out to meditate and spend time in God's presence. And so the point of me saying that was to suggest that everybody is wired differently. And so each of us has to find our own rhythm. For me, that solitude in the morning time and that solitude in the car. I love commuting because actually I embrace time for solitude in commuting. Whereas for a lot of people during their commute, they just came out of a crazy and hectic meeting or a crazy and hectic day. And the first thing they do is turn on talk radio, and it gets crazier, and they get more pollution in their spirit, and they get more noise. And we live in a very noisy and chaotic world. And so it's very important that we exercise solitude. Of course, also my fitness, 4 days a week at minimum. I'm actually in the gym for a couple of hours at a time. And so I love to read. I'm consistently reading. So I practice this stuff, you all. So as I'm walking with my clients, right, I can literally talk to them as a practitioner, and not just theory, not just ideas of what I want them to live out, but I tell real life stories and real life scenarios of things I'm doing on a daily basis so that my clients know the authenticity and the realness, the reality behind who I am and what I do. Again, all of that, the intent of me talking about all of that wasn't about me. The intent was to say, I need you to find your rhythm. I need everybody out there who's listening, who's watching us right now, be intentional about finding your rhythm. And the gap for many of us right now is that we have goals and aspirations, both as it pertains to, success factors in our lives, but also peace factors in our lives. The challenge is our discipline doesn't match the goals and aspirations that we have for our lives. Again, both on the success side, whether it's education, business, whatever the case, or whether it's peace. We're not getting up every day exercising discipline in the categories where we want to see greater achievement and greater success. And I'm challenging that for people. I challenge that for my clients, and I'm challenging that for every listener that's out here. Don't come to me and complain about the things you say you want in your life, and you're not willing to make the adjustments and put the disciplinary measures in place to go and get what it is you say you want.
That's good.
Dr. Garner Scott, can I piggyback on that from Brother Flynn? Because I think that's so important. And what I'd like to share with the audience is that, as he mentioned, find your rhythm. And I think what happens with a lot of people is they wonder, how do you establish that discipline? How do you, and so when they start to try to do it, they may do it one day and it's like, it doesn't really work. And then maybe another day and it doesn't work. And then we stop. And so where the change comes is when we continue to do it. Just as much as it takes us to break a habit, it can take that to start a habit. And especially from a faith concept, as Reverend Backus was talking about, I've never met anybody that tried to build their faith. They tried to read the Bible. They tried to be in Bible study. They tried to have meditation time. They've had to try to have prayer time. They try to be disciplined about it. I've never met anybody that did that and didn't love it. And so when you try it, for a couple of days, you got to give it time to work. And because God is waiting for us to establish discipline. God is waiting for us to meet God wherever we, when we know we're going to meet God, whether it's the morning, the evening, a couple times in the afternoon, whatever it is that fits your rhythm. God knows we're going to meet us at that spot, and God will meet you there. But we got to give that time to happen. And sometimes what happens is we expect something to happen right away, but we got to trust that process. And as we continue to do, for Brother Flynn to stop listening to the radio. I mean, once we start doing it and establish a habit, one of the things that has happened in this COVID-19 season is we've realized there's a lot of things we do in life that just don't matter. And when we got to the point that we couldn't do them, then we realized, wow, I'm okay without it. I can still get through life without it. And God will give me some other things that will help me through that are even better than what I thought I had.
And can I just add, and I'm just so excited about this, because this is, just like our brothers are saying here, my routine is I work out 5 days a week. I'm Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I work out with my trainer. I was going to the gym, but with COVID, my trainer now comes to me because I have a gym in my home. And so he comes here. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I walk at least 5 miles. I walked this morning 5 miles. I didn't walk this Tuesday because I was at the pole working. But Tuesdays and Thursdays are my walking days. I do yoga. I was doing yoga at the gym, but with the pandemic, one of my sorority sisters, she's a yogi, and so now I host a Monday night yoga class for women. And I'm not the yoga instructor, but my sorority sister is, but the women are there at my invitation. And so I have 15, 20 women meeting me every Monday night for yoga on Zoom, and they're all over the country. They're not all in Atlanta. We link, we come in, we do an hour of yoga together. And then on the days that I'm not in that group, I have a yoga app and I'm doing stuff on my own. The thing is, what I'm hearing every one of us say is we got to be disciplined. We have to be intentional and consistent. And when you see those things, success is found in the things we do every day. When we recently, I was in a nutrition class, and the nutritionist said, it's not what we eat occasionally that determines the level of our health. It's what we eat every day. So some things you can eat occasionally for maybe the holiday or a special occasion, but you can't eat it every day. If you eat it every day, it's going to impact your A1C level. It's going to impact your cholesterol level. It's going to impact your blood pressure or whatever. So the thing is that we got to find ways to be healthy, intentional ways, and knowing our rhythm, knowing ourselves. Everybody's not a morning person. You might be an evening person or whatever that is. You have to find that. And I also want to say, I want to speak to our Black women, because we have bought into the strong Black woman mentality that we have to carry everybody and everything. We do not have to carry everyone and everything. Superwoman is a myth. That is not reality. And we are killing ourselves trying to be everything, all things to all people, carry the family, carry the church, carry our children, carry our husbands, carry mama and everybody else. We got to learn how to spread the wealth. We got to know when we need to take a break. I worked the polls on Tuesday. Yesterday, I stayed in my pajamas all day until I had to go to Bible study last night. So you got to know when to stop. You got to know when to take a break. And even in COVID, you can still travel. I've been, my husband and I, we get in the car and we go and we just shut down for a couple of days. You take your Lysol with you, wipe down, whatever you got to do, wear your mask. You can still travel. But you just got to travel differently. I said COVID has changed. People say, well, I can't go anywhere. You can go some places. You just may have to do it differently. And so you can't get out. Take a walk. One of the best things about being in this pandemic is being outdoors. I started recently hiking and going to trails in Georgia that I'd never been to because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started getting in the car, going to trails and exploring things that was right in my backyard or an hour away, 30 minutes away, that I didn't even know was there. But I started taking advantage of that time and walking and hiking and going to waterfalls. And nature is one of the best ways for mindfulness and taking care of ourselves and seeing God in the midst of a pandemic.
Dr. Reverend Backus, you were going to say something
real quick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Things I've discovered in the 40-day journey, I knew it before it became real, is that discipline is the same root word for disciple. So you can't really be a disciple without discipline. The second thing is I've discovered, if you treat every day like day one, think about when you make up your mind for New Year's resolution, you hype day one, like I'm gonna get it. You're at the gym, you buy a new outfit, but day 2 or 3, day 4 or 5 is when you start to struggle. But if you treat every day like day one, and if you get off track, give yourself the space and grace to just get back on track, but not use it as an excuse. And then the final thing that I'll say is, as you treat every day like day one, remember that habits, through COVID, I was able to start tracking my habits.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to reverse engineer to figure out what triggered those habits. And when I identified my habits, I was able to start habit stacking. One of the things I do coffee in the morning. So because I know I'm going to do coffee, I started putting exercise gear right there next to it. So I knew I had to go out on a walk and go do things like that. So as you identify your habits, you're able to habit stack, and it becomes more easy and convenient. It flows easier with your lifestyle. So just to add those points.
And it becomes a lifestyle. That's what happens. It becomes a lifestyle. And one of my hashtags, when I get done working, I post. And I have people that follow me on social media because I post every morning after I work out. And one of my hashtags I use is my lifestyle, because this is not just a hobby that I'm doing. This is my lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And when it didn't start out that way, but it didn't start 20 years ago when I started on this self-care journey. It was rough, and there were times where I fell off or whatever, but the more I did it and became consistent, it becomes a lifestyle. And now my body craves exercise because it has been conditioned to exercise. So it becomes a part of who you are.
I wanted to add, Reverend Thibodeaux said that there are things that we started to realize in the pandemic that we no longer need. There was a meme on social media a few months ago that said, "I can't believe I used to leave the house every day 5 times a week. That seems a bit excessive now." And so the way that we thought we had to burn ourselves out, the way that we we're so used to being in an overconsumption economy, we started to realize, hey, we don't have to be moving 24 hours of the day, every minute, every second. What I did want to hop on very quickly for the reverends that are on this is, we touched on mental health a little bit, but we're starting to see, a lot of upticks in the African-American community, the Black community, in regards to just a lot of mental health challenges. What are you starting to see in your congregations? And what are some of the faith-based strategies that you're sharing with them to help them cope with not turning to dangerous behavior?
Well, I'll start. The mental health, first of all, it's been a learning experience, because you mentioned earlier, Dr. Garner Scott, that it was kind of a taboo conversation, growing up, and people didn't really speak about it. Families didn't really speak about it. But I would add to that is, I think families and parents and adults did the best that they could do for what they knew. And I'll speak that of myself. There's mental illness in my family, and I'm learning how to cope with it and deal with it, myself. And so I grew up not understanding it. And so then that carried over to now. Not that I didn't want to embrace it, I just didn't know. And I just did the best that I could. And then also, it's important to overcome the stigmatism that, people attach to mental health. Some of us go through different struggles for different reasons. And there's medical aspects to it. There's spiritual aspects to it. But I think, God has given persons in place to help that, in addition to our faith, in addition to our partnering with God. God places people like counselors and licensed therapists that are present to provide help. And so one of the things that we try to do in our community is get rid of the stigmatism that there's something wrong if you need therapy, or there's something wrong if you need counseling. It's all a source of help. It's all a source of grace. It's all a source of trying to get better. And so we've been trying to erase that stigmatism. And how do we do that? We simply talk about it. We ask people, how is their mental health? We presented webinars in connection with Thibodeaux and Silence the Shame, as it deals with suicide. And so then there's an expansion of that into mental health. And so that's been one of our highly attended webinars that we've had. And so we've put it out there so that we can say to people, this is an issue. We can't hide from it. There's those of us that are affected by it and those of us that are infected by it. And either way, we've got to work through it and figure out how to best establish coping mechanisms to go through it. Because a lot of us don't have all the answers, and it's new for all of us. And as it's risen because of all the other effects that we're going through, we've got to figure out how do we cope with it and how do we maintain with it. And then we've got to give each other a sense of hope and realizing that there's systems, there's resources in place. We have a list of resources that we can send people. So if we notice that somebody needs help, it's not just well, let me try to find some help. It's here's a list of resources. These are places that you can go, that you can communicate, that you can talk, that you can find somebody that's specialized in this area. And what that says to people, Reverend Backus mentioned it earlier, we're not alone. It helps people understand that they're not going through this journey alone. They're not that different from anybody else. The struggle is just different. We're different individuals as we go through this journey, but it's important that we help people realize that we're okay, that there's help, and that there's hope along this journey.
And I want to add, is mental health. This whole mental health conversation is very personal for me. My husband and I, our middle son has a diagnosed mental illness, and so we know what it's like to pastor and help people where mental health is concerned. But we also know what it's like in our home. And so our son is 22 years old, but at the age of 18, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And that has been an emotional roller coaster for him, for our family. And I don't mean just for me and my husband, but even my other two children who do not have a diagnosed mental illness. But I think the fact that we have been touched by it personally, and when I say touched by it, I'm talking about where our son has been hospitalized and our son has to be on medication, and it's been trial and error finding the right medication and all of that. And then as a young person, helping him to process that and go and understand what he's going through, and the times that he's gone off the rail and we have to help walk him back. And all of that, the patience that it requires, the level of unconditional love that is required when you're dealing with someone with a mental illness. Mental illness is hard on families. And so, but one of the things that's been good for our congregation is that my husband and I and our family we've been very transparent about the fact we have not hidden that because if my son had cancer, I would stand in front of the church and ask them to pray for him. So why wouldn't I ask the church to pray for him if he's going through a mental health crisis? And there have been times we've had to do that. And so because of that, it's allowed us to be relatable with our congregation and others who know us. And so we're very open about that. And then theologically, helping people understand that the mental health is a part of it's all a part of the whole makeup of who God created us to be. So, our mental health is not separated from our physical health. It's not separated from our spiritual health. All of it is a part of the creation of who God created us to be. And God has gifted people to understand how to help us manage those things. I am a pastor, but my sister-in-law is a psychiatrist, a medical doctor. And so we have a little running joke where, I'm Dr. Alvarado and she's Dr. Alvarado. But I always tell people she writes prescriptions and I write sermons, but we can both help. You see what I'm saying? And so we don't see a difference between science and theology. We see that it works together. It's all a part of who God created us to be. And so mental health is a part of that. It's just an aspect of who we are. And like you said, as we talk about it, as we're open about it, we take the stigma away from it, and people are open to share. And as far as therapy is concerned, everybody needs a therapist. I love my therapist. I keep on speed dial if I need her. And so I encourage everyone to have a therapist. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you have a mental illness or something like that. But we all have to process life, and we have to process experiences, and we need safe spaces where we can talk about things with someone that we don't have to worry about if they're going to see us differently if we tell the truth about how we're feeling about something. I think every pastor needs a therapist. We have a lot of unhealthy people in pulpits, and because they're not caring for themselves mentally, and pastoring is a very stressful profession. And so you've seen lately over these last few years, we've seen a rise in pastoral suicide and homicide and things of that nature. Is because we're not paying attention to who we are emotionally, psychologically, and mentally, and we need to do that.
That's good. That's a perfect segue into our next topic, reconciling science and religion in combating COVID-19. But I did want to let everyone know who signed up for today's panel that Alive and in Color will be emailing out a helpful document of additional resources for telehealth service providers that you can utilize if you find that you are being overwhelmed during this time, or you're needing just any additional services to help you through the pandemic in a very positive way. Alive and in Color will be sending that email out, so be on the watch for that. So to segue into science and religion, and this is going to get very interesting. Alive and in Color brought us a panel about the infodemic, which is taking place in our economy right now in our society. It covered conspiracy theories and misinformation that are making it extremely difficult for public health officials to get the virus under control. The fact is, if we took very simple measures, wearing a mask, washing our hands regularly, staying 6 feet away from anyone in public places, we would reduce our risk of infection by more than 65%, according to studies. But there are all types of beliefs and belief systems that are making people want to not adhere to a lot of that. And so according to that same study conducted by Alive and in Color, faith and religion might be one of those strong beliefs that tend to have people not wanting to believe some of this science that's being put out. So 89% of African-Americans respondents indicated a belief that prayer was an effective to very effective way to prevent COVID-19 infection. And that's prayer only. 45% of African-American respondents indicated a belief that COVID-19 is a sign of the end of times. I definitely have some family members that believe that. And almost 20% indicated of African-Americans indicate a belief that COVID-19 is a punishment from God. So, let's talk about this. Reverend Thibodeaux, I'll start with you. So I'll go back to all that has happened in 2020, and I think that we can all agree that we is tired. Like, we are tired as a community, we're tired as people, and it seems like there's no end in sight. Every time we get closer to an end, it seems to be prolonged. Do you feel like that we are in the end of times?
Well, let me answer it like that. And I don't know how I drew this straw to start this one off first, but I'll take it for the team, and I'm sure we'll chime in. But let me just answer it like this. You know, we can look at the Gospel of Mark, and you know, we can see that, you know, when the end of times is coming, that the gospel will be preached all over the world. I mean, that's happening. You know, we can look at the Gospel of Matthew, and we can see that nation will rise against nation. I mean, that's happening. But I don't focus on whether or not there's a definitive answer to whether we're in the end of times. I focus on hope, because you know, how do we keep operating if we're feeling like we're in the end of times? You know, that's God's decision when the end of this world will happen. And we know God's going to take care of that. And we don't know the hour. We don't know the day. We don't know when it's going to happen. And so I choose, you know, God continues to be sovereign. God will do what God desires to do. I don't focus on whether or not it's a punishment. I do believe that God is trying to get our attention. I do believe that as God has continued to ask us for all of our heart, our mind, and our soul, that we have been lacking in giving that. I do believe that one of our first commandments is God says, take the earth and subdue it and take care of it, handle it. And we haven't done a good job handling it. And so I do believe God is trying to get our attention. But whether or not, I don't focus on it being at the end of times. I focus on continuing to seek God, continuing to trust God, and continuing to hope in God. You know, as Christian believers, our hope is in Jesus Christ. And we know that, again, what is going to happen. But it's not our focus to continue to worry about that. You know, the Bible also says to seek ye first in God's kingdom and all his righteousness, and not to worry about tomorrow, because there's enough worry in itself. And so I believe in continuing towards God's plan and God's purpose for our lives, and embracing whatever that is, embracing the journey to find that out. And not having a high concern on whether or not this is the end of times, but having a high concern of continuing to hear God's voice. You know, and our great theologian Howard Thurman says that we are all searching for the voice of the genuine. And I believe that as we all continue to search for God's voice, that's the most important part. And God's voice may tell you and give you a direction on where you should go and what you should do, and how God's trying to get our attention throughout all of this. But that's for the experience that you have, both of yourself individually and collectively. So that's how I'll answer it. That's how we continue to minister to those that are around us, to continue to focus on hope, continue to build up our faith, encourage our faith in Jesus Christ, and see where that takes us.
Thank you. Thank you. Reverend Backus, I would like to turn it over to you now. You briefly mentioned at the beginning that you're a COVID-19 survivor. Would love to just hear more about your journey with that, and has that changed any of your thought process in regards to dealing with it?
Absolutely. You asked about the mental health piece earlier. I kind of connect this. That's actually what got me started on this 40-day journey. Mm-hmm. I suffered from the long haul effects afterwards, where I had neurological after effects. Mm-hmm. And it really started like a spiritual mental warfare. Some of the practical things I had to do, and I'll get back to the question. Mm-hmm. Pressure bust pipes, right? That if there is not release and relief, it creates all type of backup in the mind that stimulates and triggers other issues in the body. So one of the things I had to do was start focusing on journaling. Documentation beats conversation every day of the week. So as I started journaling my experience and discovering and meditating, it really helped to relieve a lot. Then I started coming up with checklists every day that I had to do, a physical checklist and a spiritual checklist. The physical, I wrote down like when did I eat? Did I eat right? How much sleep did I get? And did I take my vitamins? Was I active on that day? On the spiritual checklist, it was, did I worship? Did I pray and meditate? And was I in the word? And when I did those things, it really helped, streamline my process coming out of it. But I am a COVID survivor. I don't know that I took it seriously at first. I think I was susceptible to what we see in a lot of our communities. I have seen that we are more cautious around people that we don't know, but it's actually, I believe, the people that we do know that are much more dangerous because we let our guard down. But we don't know who they've been exposed to. And I believe that's how I got it. I let my guard down around some people that I thought I knew that didn't have it, because you can be asymptomatic and don't know. So for me, it was a very difficult process. I'm still going through coming back. I actually, had to take a medical leave from law school because just the after effects really just plagued my mind. So, I mean, it is real. I wear a mask now. I was probably too cavalier too nonchalant about it, but it is a real thing. I am a survivor. I thank God for it. So.
Excellent. And so would you say a lot of tradition in our communities is the laying of hands, prayer, healing. These are long-standing traditions, especially in the Black church. With the advent of COVID, how do pastors and faith leaders address the conversation about God's ability to heal medically or miraculously? We're seeing these conversations happen a lot. We're seeing generational breakdown on how these conversations are being approached, and we'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that term medically or miraculously, I think is key. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive, right? Mm-hmm. That you can be pursuing medical healing at the same time you're praying for miraculous healing. And it may be that the miraculous healing is actually carried out through the medical process. When I pray for people, I pray if they're going to have surgery, Lord, allow that surgeon to work a masterpiece. And I connect my faith to the medical process and ask that whoever that medical practitioner is supernaturally endowed by the power of God to have divine clarity and insight. So I'm very intentional, strategic about connecting the medical and the miraculous. I do believe in the miraculous, but I do believe that God gave us examples of medical. There are a couple examples in the Bible when Jesus opened a blinded man's eyes. He made cakes of mud, which was a medicinal purpose at that time. There was another miracle where Jesus set loose a man's dumb tongue. Jesus spat on his hands because they believed in the medicinal power of that spit and touched his tongue, and he was able to speak. So I think there are examples in the Bible, but then also if all revelation comes from God, the medical advancement had to come from somewhere. So, I believe that supernatural insight, that's what I pray for. I don't believe that the two are mutually exclusive. And I think when it comes to laying hands specifically, obviously that's a challenge now, not being able to be connected. But the example that Jesus gave of that centurion's faith, he said that you don't even have to go to my home. You can send the word. So in our prayer, we talk about being very specific about it. But again, I don't think that medically and miraculously are necessarily exclusive, but we do have a place for both. People take Advil, you take your medicine. It just gets that simple. So you don't want to stigmatize the medical dimensions of healing.
That's good. That's good. Mr. Flynn, did you want to chime in on that? Just between the balance between faith and belief in the advancement of science?
Well, I think I'm happy to. I want to also be sensitive to. I think we have 20 minutes left for questions for our audience, right? So I would rather defer to our audience and make sure that we give them some time. I think this time is for them.
Yet, but as soon as we do, I'm going to drop them in.
Great. Well, I mean, I'm with Brother Thibodeaux from the vantage point of, I personally, and we could get into all kinds of conversations about the end times and prognosticate when Jesus returns and all types of stuff. And ultimately, as Brother Thibodeaux said, for me, the emphasis is getting up every single day and focusing on what I can control. And I think a lot of times our mental health challenges come from the stress and worry about all the other things around us. I like to tell one thing for us to think about, you all, is how we have been trained since birth, right? Somebody has taught us how to think since we came out of the womb, right? So we had structure in our household, structure in elementary, middle, high school, college, the workplace, et cetera. And many people literally haven't learned the habit of thinking for themselves. And so as a result of that, the work culture has completely transformed, in a very negative sense, the way we react to the world around us. And so all the stigmas and everything you read in some of the scientific data that you shared, I would like to tell people, look, let's keep it simple. Focus on the things you actually can control. I want to speak to the fact that, look, I was born to a teenage mom in poverty in Memphis, and I keep a therapist on retainer, literally. I'm very proud in public about the fact that I have coaches and therapists, in my life. And frankly, my life didn't really take off and go to the next level until I got in touch with the roots of my pain and my brokenness and my sickness. I was born to a teenage mom in poverty in Memphis. That's a reality. Don't try to run from that. Don't try to dodge that. My dad wasn't in my life. He's still not in my life. I got uncles who are crackheads and drug addicts. And so the point is, like, I got enough problems of my own that focusing on all the other stuff around me only creates and proliferates more pain in my life. And so I want to challenge everybody out there to really take a step back, assess where your brokenness and where your own personal pain is, and go out and get some help. I wanted to really speak to that because I think it's vitally important. And as I said, I didn't really accelerate and take off in my life until I was willing to be honest. I'll say this last thing and I'll shut up. Most of us overestimate who we actually are at the expense of underestimating who we have the capacity to become. All right. And so I just want that to let that sink in for a minute. For those of us who get up every day, we're running, and we never really take the time to self-assess. And as a result, we can't really deal with our sicknesses and what's really going on with us because we're so busy living according to the standards of the voice and the noises around us versus really truly taking a self-assessment and observing what we actually need to deal with and work on. And so for me, the therapeutic process, having coaching in my life, mentorship in my life, finding community and being able to really deal with the truth about who I am and who I was, that is actually what has allowed me to catapult. And now, boom, I'm able to, quote unquote, define success in my life.
That's good.
In every aspect.
So we're going to segue into our last topic of tonight. Thank you, everyone, for so much knowledge sharing that's been taking place. I wanted to talk about the present role of the Black church in crisis. And so as we segue into that, Reverend Backus, I would love for you to you have so much historical knowledge of the Black church and the Black church's role in our community. If you could just give the audience a little history on how you felt like the Black church has served the community through the decades.
Yeah, I mean, taking it back to the era and age of slavery, typically and originally, the pastor or church leader was one of the most educated people in the congregational population. They learned how to read. We look at Nat Turner as an example, learning how to read to be able to preach the Bible. So there was an expectation that that person would have to develop diverse skill sets to be able to speak in different dimensions of people's lives. So, traditionally, the preacher or pastor had to be an educator, had to know something about finance, had to know a little bit about medicine and healing, and had to be a little bit of a lawyer to help, mediate a lot of different issues and challenges. So the church has been that safety net historically where people have looked to and go to again for the purposes of community. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm very concerned about COVID, because the church as the gathering place, when that place is closed, then you don't have that collective consciousness, collective energy that helps to motivate and inspire. So again, historically, the churches started Black colleges. A lot of them started in the Black church. A lot of the businesses, the insurance companies that we saw, a lot of the early real estate companies and development. So this has been across the years. Modern context, churches are still doing a lot of the same things. And Friendship is doing a lot of development down there. Ebenezer has done a lot. Certainly Abyssinian since 1808 has been at the vanguard of the Black church experience. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. is a congressman, the most successful congressman in U.S. history, 60 pieces of legislation in 5 years, who was the chief architect behind Lyndon Johnson's Great America. We have certain things like funding for education, disability, because of the creative genius of the Black church and being able to always have their finger on the pulse of what was happening. And the church as the gathering place gave us the political leverage to again begin to address policy, other issues of police brutality. And historically across the years, the church has just been that gathering place. It is where we saw common expertise come together again, to reimagine creative solutions to address the crisis that Black America is facing.
That's good, and also that helps segue us into the future of church. We have a question that's come in from the audience that says, "How have you? How is doing church traditionally differ from doing church non-traditionally?" And I would love to direct that question to Reverend Thibodeaux in regards to impact. Slogan is, doing church differently. How does that apply to church now in the pandemic?
Well, certainly ministry is not going to be the same. We can say that it's as Reverend Backus talked about church being the gathering place. And so right now we've got to figure out different ways to gather. And even when the pandemic comes to a cease and there's a vaccine and whatever needs to happen for it to come to an end, there's still a myriad of emotions, a myriad of thoughts and reactions to even coming back to church. And so the church of the future, here's what I think, the churches have to have a grasp upon. The Great Commission has always been to go out and make disciples. And I think not an indictment to church, but just a reality. We've lacked in our going out. We've done a great job with people in church that have always been in church. Sometimes, during a sermon, if you ask how many people grew up Catholic, a lot of people raise their hand. How many people grew up Baptist? How many people grew up Seventh-day Adventist? How many people grew up Kojic? You get a lot of people that raise their hand. You ask the question, how many people didn't grow up in church? Normally, you don't get a lot of hands. And that means we've got to do a better job, because those are the persons that we need to be going out to and making sure that we have God talk in any kind of way that we can. And so the church of the future has got to continue to figure out ways to reach people and figure out ways to go out. And let me just say, virtually and digitally, if a church has not figured out how to go reach people digitally and virtually, the church is going to be in tough shape, because that's where the world is. And here's the thing: the world wants God, but the world doesn't necessarily believe that they can find what they need in church. And so that's what we've got to do a better job as the church, is helping them understand, well, God is everywhere. And yes, God is in the church. Yes, there's full of people in the church. Yes, we've made some mistakes in the church. But let's figure out that koinonia, that community, and how to keep everybody together, and realize that that's what helps people understand that we're all going through life together. So the future of the church is going to be, we're going to have to continue to pivot in the ways that we go out, virtually, digitally, doing things differently. And especially now, people need more than just bright lights. They need more than just loud music. They need more. People are looking for spiritual content, and we've got to find ways to make sure to reach them, establish groups, establish places inside and outside of the church that help people enhance their relationship with Jesus Christ. That's our work, and we've got to be intentional in doing that.
That's good.
If I can, it's interesting how time has a way of bringing things full circle, right? When you look at the mega church phenomenon of today, it didn't start out like that. They had, at the gate called Beautiful, when that first sermon and 5,000 saved, but it was like 5 million, 9 million people there. So it wasn't like super huge, but they transitioned into house churches. They transitioned into smaller nuclear groups. That's where the faith really began to grow. I went to Korea, went to Yodo Full Gospel Church. They had 1 million members. They started in small house groups and churches and began to grow. So when we look at what's happening now, the traditional places, I think we may have idolized the church building and the sanctuary. I think so. And now that has been stripped away and taken away, we're getting back to what's real and what's relevant. The gospel. How does the word of God minister to me, and how do I minister to others through the word of God? And when you look at the early church, it was those small groups, those small gatherings that spiritually fortified each other. Even when you look at the miracle of Jesus when he fed 5,000 men, first thing he did was get them in groups of 50. to organize them. So from their hand, from God's hand to their hand, you had cooperative economics, you had cooperative storytelling, sharing of narratives, relationship building. So I think it's going to be so critical coming out of this. I think we've lost relationship building. We become herders rather than shepherds. This is forcing us to reevaluate everything we do and why we do it, because we don't have unlimited resources anymore. Churches are financially trying to survive, so you got to cut the excess. You got to cut all those things that don't matter anymore, and it's forcing us to get to the basics, to the core essential. Are we reading the Word of God? Are we preaching and teaching the unadulterated gospel of Jesus Christ? Are we praying? I think this is forcing us to pray a lot more too. Spurgeon, every great movement, Martin Luther used to pray 3 hours every day for the Protestant Reformation. Charles Spurgeon, who had one of the largest churches in the world at the time in England, he prayed 2 hours before he even went to the pulpit. I mean, there was a level of prayer. And I think now that we're getting there, you see the democratization of the pulpit. I can start a Facebook Live and have just as many people almost as any mega church in America right now. And now you don't have the energy of the crowd. I'll be honest, sometimes I don't know if I prepared the way I should, because I knew if it got good to me, people start saying amen. I start getting revelation, and it happened. But now, that's just not the case anymore. So more prayer, more study, more worship, and more gathering together in smaller groups.
And I want to speak to that too. I oddly enough, Thibodeaux, I didn't grow up in the church. And so I didn't really fully come into being with my connection to the church until I was age 24. And what was crazy was I had a dream job at a Fortune 100 company, had the world promised to me I was going to be a Fortune 200 CEO. That was my dream. And that encounter with, relationship, as Backus just shared, it changed my life. There was a guy who was a youth pastor who was about to plant a church, and his wife was my business mentor in college. And because of that human connection, so I had been around church, right? But I'm the boy from the hood who the church never reached. And so I didn't understand how so many people could be in pain in my community and all these churches on every corner, and nobody showed up to quote unquote preach the gospel to us. It was a personal encounter to the very point both of you made. It was a personal encounter that changed my life. And within 90 days of that personal encounter, I was walking away from corporate America, and I became a youth outreach worker on a grant that eventually led to me helping to co-plant a church. And man, we grew like gangbusters, and I reached drug dealers, prostitutes, dope boys. I mean, you name it. I was in the very hood I grew up in, because finally the gospel reached my core, it reached my spirit. And I had never heard you can be saved by grace through faith. I grew up in a works righteousness world, a works righteousness community, right? And so the point that you all are making is, let's take the gospel back to its originally intended format, where the gospel is coming to us, reaching us at the core, versus us just gathering for the sake of lights, camera, action, And so, by the way, I'm a huge fan of the local church. I want to make sure I say that, I want to intensely say I'm a huge fan of the local church. I'm highly involved in my current church. I'm helping as we continue to grow and scale. And so huge product, but I want to see church done where it can reach, the unreached, as I like to say. And so COVID, frankly, and don't you all shoot me for saying this, but I think just like the market disciplines companies, that, you can't stay in business if your products suck, if your services suck, people won't shop with you, and ultimately you won't survive. And I think, in this climate that we're in right now with the COVID crisis and everything else going on, those of us who have been playing church, as I like to say, I'll just say that there's a lot happening where if you're not serious about getting the gospel out there, then there's a rude awakening happening for a whole lot of people right now.
Well, one of the things that as COVID has done is that it's taught us how we can worship at home. But we don't need to have, we don't just have to have worship in the church building. Families have had to worship at home. Families have had to experience God at home. Families have had to not wait for anybody to prompt them to stand up and give God praise. They've had to find the opportunity to do that. at home. And that's one of the ways that we've been able to find out that there's nowhere that we can go to be separated from God's love. That's one of the ways we've been able to find out that it is true that, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness therein. And so wherever we are, we can establish that connection, that partnership with God that God so desires for us. And so we've been able to work and find that at home. Now, the church, as a church, we've got to now continue to do our part to reach out and to go get and to make sure that we take we don't have to recite the gospel to take Christ to people. It's in the way that we live. It's in the way that we communicate. It's in our transparency. It's in the way that we exhibit love. We don't have to quote scriptures to be an example for Christ. That is certainly part of the walk and certainly a part of the journey, but we can all be part of that journey in just being who God created us to be.
That's good. So as we get ready to close out tonight's conversation, once again, I want to thank all of you so much. The different perspectives, the overall transparency, and just for you wanting to continue to connect with our community is just so beautiful. So thank you all so much. Also, thank you to Alive in Color for just the research that went into this. I love being able to spit out numbers and talk about the facts and not just opinions. In a world of so much disinformation, that's very, very important. And then also thank you to the Gathering Spot for continuing to know how we need to foster these connections and conversations. And when I'm reminded of the Gathering Spot's call to action, their tagline is always, "We're all we got." And I can't help but think about our conversation about the Black church and how the Black church serves as a social safety net for Black America during this time. So as we get ready to close out, I would love to just go around the panel and talk about where do we go from here. Given all that we discussed tonight, given everything that we've covered, what are some of the more promising possibilities for a more mobilized and organized faith community? And we can start with Dr. Alvarado, since you're popping back on. Yep, and I understand technical issues. It happens to all of us. But
my computer, I didn't realize my computer wasn't plugged up, so it started. My battery went down, so I had to get on my iPad.
No problem.
So where do we go from here? Is the question.
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, first of all, when you were talking about church and community, as I was coming back in and listening, I think that we definitely have to speaking of technology, up our technology game. Because I don't think we're ever going to go back to a pre-COVID existence where technology is just an option of just something. It's really, we're going to always have to be in this virtual space in one way or another. And so I think just continuing to help our communities to close the digital gap in terms of our children and our youth, where as relates to technology and having computers in their home and things of that nature, because we just don't know. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to persist. And so as children are at home in school and we're having to do church virtually and everything else virtually, work virtually, we need to make sure that we up our technology game in our community, and then to continue to create opportunities and spaces like what we're doing tonight to have these conversations and to fellowship and connect with one another, so that even though we are physically distant, we can still be connected as community.
That's good. Reverend Backus?
Yeah, Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." I am energized and excited by the mobilization that we have seen and how many people are active and engaged. It is my prayer that we do not lose the faith, that we do not wane in our continued progress to struggle. We are facing systemic issues, getting back to the health dimensions of this conversation. The issues that we're facing, are largely part of systemic racism, of inequity, those issues that will continue to be there. We can continue to put a Band-Aid on deep lacerations, we can continue to address the symptoms rather than the sources. But if you keep doing the same thing you've been doing, we always are going to have what we have right now. It's time for a change. So excited to be on here. But we must mobilize, we must organize, we must keep the faith and keep fighting if we want to see the change that we desire to see.
That's good. That's good. Mr. Flynn?
Yes, ma'am. I think it's Jeremiah 12:5 that says, or I may have it flipped, but if you've raced it with men on foot and they have worn you out, how can you compete with horses? And so I just want that to settle with people, that we're in a time where our faith is being tested, and the level of the resolve and the resilience that lives on the inside of you. Now is the time for that to come out. So all you've been through your entire life has literally prepared you for the moment, for the season, and for this time that we're in right now. And so I'm challenging everybody. We are a resilient people. People of color, and all people, have exhibited resilience, right? Specifically, the African American community. We are a resilient people, and over years and years and years, we've shown a level of resolve that it's up to us to proliferate and perpetuate that resolve. And so let that be a lesson for everyone, and wishing everybody the best as they go forward, as we continue to navigate what's happening in our world. It will never be the same, but none of us are the same as we were 10 years ago, right? I mean, so we've always been able to evolve, and so keep evolving. That's good.
That's good. And Reverend Thibodeaux?
Our generation between the ages of 20 and 30, their religion right now is no religion at all. And so where we have to go from here is, as much as we are unashamedly Black, we've got to be unashamedly lovers of God and lovers of the gospel. And we've got to continue to find ways that where the Bible grabs you, not where you grab it. And so where it comes alive, where it becomes relevant, where people understand that God is everywhere. And we've got to be unashamed of our God talk in all of our experiences. And then here's the most important thing, I think, of where we go. In the midst of our God talk, in the midst of our being unashamed, we've got to be, and Dr. Alvarado used this word, which I love, transparent, because we're still trying to figure it out, and we will continue trying to figure it out. And all of us in this journey will continue to screw it up. But that's where the grace and mercy comes in, that God allows us a second and a third and a fourth and numerous chances, and the opportunity to be forgiven and the opportunity to continue to try to figure it out. But it's important to let our next generation know, it's important to let everybody know that we don't have all the answers. We're trying to figure it out. We're all trying to go to God and experience God for ourselves and do it all together and have tough conversations, have tough dialogue together, and realize, there's not one specific way. It's a journey, it's a process, and we just got to be involved in the process.
That's so good. I want to thank everyone again so much. Thank you to Alive in Color for your vision for this. Thank you to the Gathering Spot again for providing the platform for this. Thank you to our amazing panelists. Absolutely just priceless with the gems that were shared tonight, and just the charge for excellence in our community. If you would like to connect with any of the panelists, their social media handles have been dropped again in the chat. So feel free to screenshot that and you can reach out to them. My social media has been dropped in that too, and loving to continue this conversation just in our communities across the board. If you would like to get more information, make sure that you connect with the Gathering Spot. Make sure you connect with Alive in Color in regards to getting the helpful documents or anything else to help you continue to move this conversation in your own networks as well. It has been such a pleasure, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to moving this conversation forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Have a good night.
Join you this evening.
Bye-bye.